Hi, everybody. Dan Illman, Ashley Mailloux, taking a look at race number 9 at Kentucky Downs. Really strong Saturday afternoon program at Kentucky Downs, including this race. Let's throw up the field for the Grade 2 Ladies Turf Sprint. $1.5 million is the purse. With that kind of money, you're going to get a giant field, 12 in the body of the race, 13 through 16 also eligible. And this is just a wide open affair.
It certainly is. Everyone wants to be in it. You mentioned the distance being 6.5. I find to be really intriguing because you're going to see a lot of horses cutting back from, say, a mile and an eighth in their last couple of starts. And then you're going to have other horses that might be more of the 5.5 furlong specialist, and they have to stretch out. And all of these horses now have to adopt to the weird configuration that Kentucky Downs has. So I find it wide open. You can see that on the morning line. And when we start to dive through this field, I think there are many cases to be made for over half the field.
You make an excellent point about the distance, however, especially as we throw up the Timeform US pace projector. And a fast horse like Coffee Maker, the number 6, is expected to make the lead, and I won't be surprised if she is after the first quarter mile. Where she is in the stretch, however, could be a whole different story because Coffee Maker going 6.5 over this demanding turf course, that could be a little bit far for her.
Could be very far for her. It could be tough for her. The lone time she tried it was at Kentucky Downs, and she tired in deep stretch. Now, she only missed by a length and a half, and it was earlier in her career. And now she's a 5-year-old. That was over 3 years ago. But I do think that also warrants the question of, now at this point in her career, can she handle going that far? I do think she'll be part of the pace scenario. You can see a couple other runners in here. The 3 figures to be close to it. I don't think that'll change. That's been kind of the story, regardless of 6.5 to a mile. The 3 likes to be into gear early, and I even still wonder where that puts some other horses in here. Ruby Nell has typically been on the lead, but in terms of fractions, she doesn't seem as quick as the other horses, and she's going to have an interesting trip in, I do think, in here, Dan, because she's going to need to maybe settle off the pace.
I think that's the key to the race. What sort of trip does Ruby Nell get, and does she really want to rate turning back in distance? She has shown the ability to win from off the pace sprinting in the past. That was the Unzip Me, where she went route to down the hill 6.5 furlongs. It worked well, but in recent starts, she's shown a lot of speed, as she did in the Buena Vista 2 starts back going a mile. Let's watch Ruby Nell's performance that day, and she just never gave them a chance. She had way too much speed, and when the best horse gets the best trip, they're going to win more often than not. And Ruby Nell is able to hold off a pretty good closer to win by a half length. They tried that trick in the Gamely last time out against better horses, and she just went too fast.
Yeah, you talked about it. If she gets an easy lead and you're watching one of her races, you're pretty much over it, because every time she gets a very easy lead, she typically wins. We saw that in the Buena Vista. You go down the page, the Lady Shamrock. But most of the time, those have come at those mile races where she's able to use her speed, get to the front, and she's not setting, say, turf sprint fractions. Now, I like that you brought up in the Unzip Me, she was able to close from off of it. In terms of the fractions there on the downhill, we expect the downhill at Santa Anita to be very quick. That's where you see a 43 half there at that distance. I guess my concern is the last 2 times where she's rated, she hasn't had that same kick. So I really think it depends on who goes in here, where she is kind of early, how close she is to it, and if just anyone has a better late kick than her. When she's been doing what she's been doing recently, which is going to the front, she's just hanging on in those races.
But she certainly has back figures. She has the class, and she's probably the horse to beat after facing 3 next out winners in the Gamely. One of them, Nadette, came back to win at Colonial with a 91 buyer. Elm Drive's another very versatile horse. I know she's been campaigning at shorter distances recently, but she's a proven commodity at 6.5, and she comes into this race off a good effort. Let's watch the Daisy Cutter handicap. This is a sharp 5/8 of a mile at Del Mar, and she's sitting off of the pace. Once she's maneuvered into the clear, though, she comes with a good run.
And I wonder if this 5 being sharp, as you mentioned, really sets her up here now for 6.5 at Kentucky Downs. I think she was closing nicely here. She had that interest late. She's a clear second. She beats Stay and Scam, who I think is a respectable horse out in California. And I just have a feeling she's going to be able to, I should say, take a big step forward here. And I'm willing to forgive the efforts 2 and 3 back. There was some moisture in the ground. So we know Kentucky Downs, assuming there's no rain, is very hot. So fingers crossed she gets firm ground. I think she's a little bit better over that surface.
AG Bullet, the number 3, is a perfect 3 for 3, going 6.5 furlongs in her career. And she comes into this race off a win, going a 2-turn mile. AG Bullet just got loose in that race. It was a really sharp ride. And as the favorite, once she got away with easy fractions, they weren't going to catch her. This is a much tougher spot, but I do think her cutting back to 6.5 furlongs, that's exactly what she wants. And she can sit just off the lead.
She can, and I think that is key, that she can sit. She does not need the lead to win. We saw that go back 4 races ago at Santa Anita. I liked those performances from her, where I don't necessarily want in a race like this to have to be on the lead to get it done. I do think she'll be close enough to it. Umberto knows her very well, has been aboard for a majority of her wins to this point in her career. And the one thing I will say, if she doesn't win, she's not usually there. Something goes kind of awry. And I think she had excuses in several of those races, that being the Bourbon at Oaks. Her debut was on dirt. And even 2 starts back, they tried her going a mile. And it was a tough race. Look who won it, Chili Flag.
Pennsylvania bred Don't Look Back at All. The number 4 is a strong contender in here. She's hit the board in her last 10. She's won her last 3. She just beat 5 of these same horses in the Caress, and she did it in likable fashion. Look how strongly she's traveling under Irad in behind horses. He hasn't even pushed the button or eased off of cover yet. And once she does, you're going to see her get a little bit of a better trip than the 2nd or 3rd place finishers. But I just love the way she was traveling throughout.
Yeah, I loved this performance from her. It was a well-timed ride as well. And now she's going to get Joel Rosario, who hasn't been aboard her in quite some time. But I like her for the same reasons you can make maybe a case for AG Bullet, that she does not need the lead to win. I do think, looking at her last several, to me, she's not one-dimensional as a 5.5 furlong horse. We've seen her do well at 6 furlongs. I don't think 6.5 will hurt her at all. Actually, she's tried a mile in her career, which is a different ball game, but she just came up a little bit short in that. So I think her running style is what has really helped her in her late turn of foot, regardless of these sprint distances.
I think trainer Jack Sisterson is still trying to figure out what distance works for the 5 Ocean Club. Going to cut her back in distance for the first time in a long time. They ran her on synthetic last time out. I just didn't see the excuses. The pace wasn't very fast, 49 and 1 to the half, and she couldn't go with those horses in a race where the winner went gate to wire and she was up close to it. She's done some good running on synthetic in the past, so I don't want to really say it was the surface that worked against her. I'm worried about her going 6.5, especially in a race where maybe she has to fall farther behind.
Yeah, I'm concerned about her at this distance over this course. Just looking at her, obviously she has to cut back significantly in distance. And her last 2, I know they're at longer distances, but she just didn't really intrigue me in the late stages of those races. I didn't see enough. And maybe that is why they're trying something new. You mentioned maybe Jack Sisterson's still trying to figure out this filly. And maybe she's just changed at this point in her career. As these horses get older, they want to do different things. They're going to go for an experiment here. And hey, why not do it when there's $1.5 million on the line? But compared to others, I just think there are some fillies and mares in here that are much more consistent, and they do have that late turn of foot that might help them in deep stretch.
The 6 Coffee Maker's a little rocket ship. She's going to go right to the lead, and I thought she ran quite well off the long layoff in the Intercontinental, considering she was facing some really good filly and mare turf sprinters. Future Is Now and Roses for Deborah. A little bit disappointed in her performance in the Caress last time out. We saw her press the pace. She never could really assert herself up front, however. Maybe she'll have an easier time getting to the lead here.
I think the issue has been kind of looking at that race and say the Woodford. I know it was against the boys, but when the pace has been sub 44 early and she's chasing it and she doesn't necessarily have the lead, that works against her. And she flattened in both of those efforts. I think she can be very game on the lead, or when she only has maybe one horse pushing her, but when there's multiple, I think that's where she struggles. And I really just struggled to get over this, Dan, as we talked about earlier. Yes, she has a ton of early foot, but 6.5 at Kentucky Downs. She's tried it once. She tired. Her last couple, I've wanted to see more from her. So you'll get a good price on her. You don't usually see these prices on a turf sprint with Wesley Ward, but I would have to pass on her in this spot.
The stretch punch just hasn't been there for the 7 Moon race, and she shipped in from overseas, got caught up in a pace duel going 5.5 at Ellis Park, 2 starts back. Then they stretched her out around 2 turns at Hawthorne, and she just didn't run very well. They're taking the blinkers off, hoping to shake things up, but 50 to 1 on the morning line, I won't dissuade anyone who likes her, but you got to make a case. It's tough.
Yeah, it's tough to make a case. She hasn't hit the board at all in 2024 from 5 starts. Go back to last year, she just had 2 third place finishes, and that was it. And you just start to wonder, was she a better 2-year-old? To me, the answer is clearly yes in terms of her performances. And I just don't know what's going to make the difference. They're going to take the blinkers off. She's had blinkers on in her last 5 stateside races. There's not much for me to say. It'd be really tough for me to use her.
Secret Money, the number 8, finished 4th behind Don't Look Back at All last time out. I think of the top 3 horses coming out of that race, she had the worst trip. She was sort of in behind horses, had to alter course a couple of times, wound up getting bumped in between late in the game. It was a good performance, and what I think folks are going to like most of all about Secret Money is she likes this course and distance.
Yep, she has the win, and that's something that you kind of look for over these courses. And it's interesting to note that when she was able to win last year in September, she was just a couple of lengths off the pace early on. It was at the 6.5 furlong distance, but look at the fractions. Not nearly what you're going to get on these other circuits that she's been on. Woodbine, Churchill, Saratoga, you name it. They've gone a lot quicker, but I like that she has a win there. I will agree that I thought last time out she ran well considering the kind of circumstances of the race, and I don't think the distance is an issue for her.
Bling is the number 9. She's cross-entered in an allowance race at Kentucky Downs earlier in the week, but she has the co-fastest time form U.S. late pace rating, just missing last time out at Ellis Park, going 5.5. She's a sign of horse that can pull off a surprise at a big price. It's interesting that they're putting blinkers on, though.
Yeah, you wonder what the strategy is here. To me, you look at her last out effort. Obviously, it was decent fractions. They went pretty quick in that preview race for this, and she only missed by a neck, but she has to face some of those rivals again. So, because she was a little bit slow and because she was trying to make up ground late, you wonder if the blinkers are just to help her with focus, make her a little bit sharper out of the gate, and get her into the race early. But this is a filly, I should say, that's never raced with blinkers at all in her career. So, interesting spot to see them come on.
I have a lot of respect for the 10 Red Carpet Ready, and from a class standpoint, she's certainly good enough to win this race. She's a multiple graded stakes winner on dirt, and it was nice to see that the turf experiment worked out pretty well for them last time out. She just missed finishing second, and she's tactical enough that she could work out a good trip.
She could, and I don't think the added distance should be an issue for her. You look at her campaign, she was primarily campaigned between 6 and 7 furlongs, so 6.5 hits her right between there, and you just don't really know. I mean, her first turf effort was good, but she could certainly take a step forward now. Second time turf, second start off the layoff. Another one that has a fair bit of early foot that should put her into a good position. Again, we talk about seeing a morning line and then thinking what to make out of a horse, and there's certainly worse 15-1 shots. She's very consistent.
The 11 Dance Macabre, like the 8 Secret Money, finished behind Don't Look Back at All in the Caress. Liked Secret Money, probably didn't have as good of a trip as the winner, in behind horses, trying to split at the very end of the race. And like Secret Money, is a proven commodity at Kentucky Downs, so maybe it's time to turn the tables on the Clement train runner.
Yeah, this would certainly put her into the millionaire club here. Obviously, she's approaching that in her career earnings, and just a very consistent filly who I like that she's very adaptable. In some of her races, she's been very close to the pace and has, kind of that late kick to get the job done. And then she can kind of come from the back of the pack and do the same thing. To me, she's just a horse that she gets better as she goes in her race. Depending where she's placed, she can find the trip. Her figures, she's consistent. I think there's a big case to be made for her, especially at this price. She was not far off last time out, and that was her first start since November. You have to think there's plenty of upside now, just making her second start as a 4-year-old.
The 12 is Awesome Treat. What I like about her is she seems adaptable to any sort of pace scenario. She's won from well-off fast fractions in the past. And last time out at Ellis, the fractions weren't as hot. She was able to stay closer to the pace, and she pulled off a big upset over a couple of these horses. Now, she's going to have to work out a trip from post position 12, but she's in sharp form, and she's proven that she can pull off upsets in the past.
Yeah, look at the upsets. Look at them. They're 2 out of her last 3 wins. She's been huge prices in those races. Different trips in them as well, but the race at Keeneland was still a decent group of competition. And then I thought the preview race was very nice as well. And she was very game in deep stretch in that race to get the win, all said and done. She really had to fight for it. But I guess it just depends what version you think is going to appear of this mare. I feel like when she's great, she's excellent. She has everything that you'd want. But in between, while her figures aren't bad, she just doesn't have the same punch. And those races in between those weren't at 5.5. They were at 5.5, excuse me. They weren't at 6.5. And I wonder if that plays a little bit of a factor into this race.
Four horses on the also eligible list. I think the 13 Aussie girl, if she gets in, deserves some consideration because she's kept some pretty good company overseas. Will Walden now is the trainer of record, and I think 6.5 will hit her right between the eyes.
And Will Walden has done a very good job since, kind of coming into the training game, but also with horses that join his barn for the first time. He really has them primed and ready to roll. And, you look at the outside horses in here. You mentioned the 13, the 14. We know her resume. She's won over half of her races. These are still really talented horses, if they were to draw in, maybe to look at further.
Let's take a look at our top selections for the ladies turf sprint. It is a wide open race. Don't Look Back at All, I think, might be one of the ones to beat in here along with Ruby Nell. She just looked so strong last time out. In the form she's in, she's going to be tough. We have the same exact, a different order.
It was exhausting to look at this race. There are so many directions to look at, and I feel like, yes, I have a top 4 here, and I really like these horses, but there are a couple of others that I think are intriguing as well. It just came down to me. I think this is a filly that's going to like 6.5, is going to be close enough to the action early on, and has that late kick. I felt like there were so many others in here, Dan, that while they're consistent and very good fillies and mares, this distance might work against them.
I'm going to use all 3 of my top selections in multi-race wagers, but I think the 11 Dance Macabre might offer the best value of the 3. She is proven over this surface, and I'd like to see her get to the outside. She breaks from post position 11. She was sort of over and behind horses, had to dive down to the rail, and I'm not sure that's really her comfort zone. So 11-4-8-2 for me, 4-11-1-8 for Ashley. Another wide open race for big money at Kentucky Downs on Saturday. Race 9 is the ladies turf sprint. Best of luck.